Alright, let us try to understand why did our forefathers choose the parliamentary system as the fine method of governance in our country. The first and foremost reason was that they were familiar with this system. The Britishers had already brought in the parliamentary system of governance through the various Government of India Acts in India. These acts helped Indians learn this system and grow familiar with it over time. This was one of the most important reasons why the parliamentary system was chosen over any other system. The next reason why parliamentary system was chosen in India was that it was envisioned as being the system which actually had more responsibility towards the legislature. That means the entire country. It is a representative form of government where the leaders of the country are answerable for their every action. This forces them to not come up with schemes which is counterproductive or tyrannical in nature. Furthermore, the parliamentary system helps the government to minimize the conflicts between the executive and the legislature. This ensures a smooth form of governance and makes it certain that there is no roadblocks while governing the country. Finally, we come to the very nature of Indian society. Indian society is diverse in nature. We know this because of the fact that our geographical boundaries are vast. When we move across the country, every 100 kilometers, we see that the culture, the nature, the language, all of these factors change drastically. So, the parliamentary system was chosen to give representation to all these people. The entire diversity of India could be blended in together like a bouquet of flowers through the parliamentary system. No other system of governance at that point of time could materialize this particular concept. Bringing all these points together are the reasons why the parliamentary system was chosen as the method of governance in our country. Alright, let us now further our knowledge by learning the distinction between Indian and British models. Even though our founding fathers adopted the parliamentary system from that of British India, however, we did not copy it entirely. We had modified it to suit our Indian conditions, which is why we need to identify which factors is it that prevent us from saying that it is a direct copy of the British system. To begin with, Indian parliamentary system is republican in nature, whereas the one in Britain is monarchical. Let us try to understand this with a little more depth. In India, we have a republican system of government. What does it mean when we say that India is a republic? You must be well aware that we celebrate Republic Day each year. The meaning of this particular celebration is that we have chosen the head of our country to be elected rather than to be hereditary. That means the head of the country, that is the President of India, is not a hereditary position. It is a position that comes only by election. So the President of India is elected. However, this is not the case in Britain. In Britain, the head of the government, not the state, the government is that of the Prime Minister. However, the head of the state is the Queen of England. In India, the head of the state is the President. So this is a stark difference between these two forms of government. In India, the head of the state, the President, is elected. However, in Britain, the head of the state, that is the Queen, she is a hereditary monarch or a king. The other defining factor is that in Britain, the parliament is completely sovereign. However, in India, we do not have a sovereign parliament. What does it mean? It means that in India, the highest authority is not granted to the parliament, but rather to the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India is the highest authority when it comes to lawmaking or any kind of decision making in the country. In Britain, the parliament is the most and the highest authority that exists in that country. The next point of this discussion tells us the difference between the prime ministerial position in India and that of Britain. India and Britain both are led by prime ministers as the head of the government. The head of the government in India, the prime minister, can be a member of either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. As for example, the current Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, is a member of the Lok Sabha, that is the lower house, whereas the previous Prime Minister of India, that is Shri Manmohan Singh, was a member of the Rajya Sabha. But in Britain, the Prime Minister has to be compulsorily a member of the Lok Sabha or the lower house. In Britain, this house is not known as Lok Sabha but rather as the House of Commons. In India, to be a minister, you need not necessarily contest in an election. I will explain in a short while how this is possible. But in Britain, it is compulsory that to be a minister, you have to be a member of the parliament. Alright, so in India, the other defining factor is that ministers are not responsible for their official acts. What does it mean? It means that ministers do not sign on the legislative decisions that they pass. But in Britain, each legislative decision and executive order has to be signed by the minister. This is not the case in India. These factors separate the administrative and the legislative processes in Britain and India. The other factor that separates these two countries, even though both are parliamentary form of governments, is that in Britain we have what is known as a shadow cabinet, which is completely missing in the case of Indian Parliament. Alright, students, we shall now take our knowledge further by identifying two different types of government in this world. The first is known as the federal form of government and the second is known as the unitary form of government. Federal form of government is the one that you experience here in India itself, and unitary form of government is the one that is prevalent in a country such as Britain. So let us see which points differentiate these two countries. To begin with, the federal form of government is characterized by a system of dual government. Dual, the name suggests two. That means there are two governments in the country. The first government is the one that sits at the center. That is the one that is sitting in New Delhi. And the second form of government is the one in our states. For example, the government of Assam. These are the two governments that play a big role in the legislative and administrative system in India. However, in countries where the unitary form of government is practiced, we have only a single government, that is the one sitting in the center. These examples include Great Britain. So, we have unitary forms of government where the constitution is not written. So the country is governed instead by a set of laws written down in their legal format. The next characteristic which separates federal form of government from that of a unitary form of government is that there is separation of power between center and state in the case of federal government, whereas no such provision is necessary in the case of unitary government. In federal form of government, the center and the state have clearly laid down identities and their limitations and administrative powers are clearly laid down by law. This is written in precision in the Constitution of India under various lists such as the unitary list, the state list and the concurrent list. In federal forms of government such as the one in India, what do we have is that the constitution is supreme. However, in unitary forms of government, the constitution may be supreme or may not be supreme. What it means is that all laws in a country where the constitution is regarded as supreme has to mandate necessarily by the laws governing the constitution. So the pathway chalked out by the Constitution of India is the guiding light for all laws written in our country. Another characteristic of federal form of government is the Constitution is more rigid in nature. Rigid means that it is more difficult to change provisions of the Constitution which would require consensus between the states and the center. But in unitary form of government, the Constitution may be rigid or may not be. We have examples of unitary form of government where the Constitution is much more flexible just because it is not written down clearly in mandated words. The final point where we look at the federal and unitary systems is a little confusing. The first thing is that we need to identify two new terms. The first term is bicameralism and the second is unicameralism. Bicameralism, as the word suggests, by the word bi means there are two houses in the parliament. This is the case such as in India where we have two houses, the upper house known as the Rajya Sabha and the lower house known as the Lok Sabha. This same thing exists in Britain as well. Britain, as you have learned by now, is a unitary form of government, but it has both these houses. That means it has the upper house, which is known as the House of Elders, and the lower house known as the House of Commons. But in federal form of government, this is quite mandatory, which brings us to the fact that in federal form of government, the lower house is known as the House of Representatives, where the upper house is known as the House of the States. Examples of bicameral legislature include that of India as well as Britain, and unicameral examples include that of China. So students, we have now come finally to the end of the lesson. Now we shall look at certain features of our constitution which are unitary in nature, starting with a strong center. In India, we have a very strong center. The center has the most authoritative power when it comes to ruling this country. Also, we should remember that states are not indestructible while we look at the Constitution of India. What does it mean? It means that the states can be destroyed, but the country cannot be destroyed. What it means is that the center has the authority to delete any state and create any new one within the borders of the nation. The next feature which characterizes the unitary form of governance in our country is that we have a single constitution in India. We do not have multiple constitutions for multiple states. One single constitution is representative of the people of India no matter where they live. However, the constitution is also quite flexible in nature. This is a feature of unitary government in India. Also in India, we do not have equality of state representation. Certain states have more number of representatives owing to their larger population in the Parliament of India, while other states have far fewer. For example, the state of Uttar Pradesh, owing to its large population, has the highest number of representatives in the Indian Parliament, whereas the smaller states such as Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland have very few or just one representative in the Parliament of India. This shows that states do not enjoy equal powers when it comes to their representation in the Indian Parliament. The other unitary features of the government of India is that we have a single citizenship. We do not have what is known as state citizenship. In certain countries of the world, the states also provide citizenship to their members. But in India, we have a single citizenship, that is, being the citizen of India. We also have the next feature of a unitary government, and that is the feature of integrated judiciary. What it means is that we have a single system of courts all over the country, starting from the Supreme Court at the top and bottoming out to other courts such as the High Court, the lower courts, etc. Alright students, the next points which showcase a unitary system of governance in India is the existence of the All India services, the ones that you are preparing for right now, such as IAS, IPS, Indian Revenue Services, etc. These services showcase the unitary governance system in India. Furthermore, the existence of the Comptroller and Auditor General, in short known as the CAG, also is a unitary feature of our governance. Furthermore, the Parliament also has authority when it comes to making laws in the state list. The Parliament can change laws in the state list with the permission of the Rajya Sabha. The appointment of the governor in all the various states is also a representation of the unitary system of governance in our country. The existence of the Election Commission and an integrated election mechanism also shows the unitary system of governance in our country. Combining all these factors and all these features show that Indian Constitution is a mixture of both federal as well as unitary systems of governance. Our founding fathers have rightly morphed the Constitution in such a way so that the best portions of the constitutions of various countries were brought together to form a beautiful amalgamation that has resulted in the Constitution of India. This is the reason why our Constitution is one of the largest constitutions of the world. The final points which showcase the unitary system of governance in India is that the Parliament has veto over the state bills. That means when it comes to the ultimate authority in granting the bills in a state assembly, the right goes to that of the Parliament of India, which can supersede over any laws made by the state government. Alright students, so we have finally reached the end of this particular chapter. Now what do? The next step is that you should go back to the textbook that I have prescribed to you. Go and read this particular chapter and then come back here on the app and solve the questions that will be provided below. After you do that, mark it as complete. Once you do so, the next step will reveal itself to you. If you have any doubts, you can revisit this lesson once again. And in case you have any further questions, you can directly ask your questions to me. So thank you so much for joining in today's class. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If for any further questions and clarifications, I am always available. Thank you and Jai Hind.